The wind had a way of finding every hole in the car. It crept in through cracks in the windows, whispering across the faces of a man and his 2 children huddled under thin blankets. Daniel pulled his coat tighter around them, rubbing his son's back to keep him warm. "We'll get through tonight," he said softly, though the words were more for himself. 10-year-old Ben nodded, while little Lily, only 6, pressed her face against her father's arm. The heater hadn't worked in months, and outside, the snow fell silently, the kind of cold that made you forget spring ever existed. Daniel had once promised his wife, before she died, that he'd always keep their children safe. But promises are easier when the world still believes in you. After losing his job at the mill and then the house, everything had unraveled. Fast debt, exhaustion, doors closing one by one. He had tried every shelter in town, but they were always full. So he drove out to the edge of nowhere, hoping the woods might give them what people no longer could: space, quiet, and a chance to start again. "Tomorrow," he whispered. "Tomorrow we'll find something better." Morning came gray and slow. Frost coated the car windows, and Daniel's fingers were numb as he tried to start the engine. It groaned once, then died. "That's it," he muttered, resting his forehead on the steering wheel. Lily stirred. "Daddy, are we going to drive again?" He smiled weakly. "Not today, sweetheart." He stepped out, his boots crunching on the frozen ground. The road was empty, except for a line of trees bending under snow. Somewhere beyond them, smoke curled faintly against the sky, thin and distant, but real. "You see that?" he said to Ben. "Looks like a chimney." They followed the smoke through the woods, trudging through drifts that reached their knees. The trees were quiet except for the soft groan of wind. After half an hour, they found it a small, weathered cabin half buried in snow. The roof sagged, and the windows were crusted with frost, but smoke rose from a rusted chimney. "Is someone living here?" Lily asked, clutching his sleeve. "Maybe," Daniel said. "Or maybe it's just an old stove someone lit to stay warm." He knocked on the door once, twice, no answer. The third time it swung open on its own, creaking like an old sigh. Inside, the air smelled of ash and wood dust. A fireplace crackled weakly, a single log glowing orange. "Hello?" Daniel called out. Only silence replied. The cabin was small, 1 room, a broken table, a few shelves, a bed missing half its frame. But compared to the car, it felt like a mansion. "Is it safe?" Ben asked. Daniel walked through cautiously. "Looks empty." On the counter sat a tin mug and a folded note, yellow with age. He opened it. "If you find this place, keep it warm. It's meant to be lived in, not forgotten." He stared at the words for a long time. Someone had cared about this place once enough to leave it behind for someone else. "Well," he said finally, "looks like we've been invited." The children grinned as they dropped their things near the hearth. Daniel gathered a few broken planks from outside and added them to the fire. Soon the cabin began to breathe, the smoke curling lazily upward, the air losing its bite. Lily sat close to the fire, hands outstretched. "It's warm, Daddy." Daniel nodded. "Yeah, baby. It's home for tonight." The cabin wasn't much, but it was shelter. Daniel found an old pot, melted snow into water, and warmed a can of soup he'd been saving. They ate slowly, every spoonful tasting like a feast. "It's the best dinner ever," Lily said between sips. Ben laughed. "You said that yesterday." "It's still true." Daniel smiled at them, his heart heavy and full all at once. Outside, the wind howled through the trees, but the walls held firm. For the first time in weeks, he didn't feel like the world was chasing them, just watching quietly, letting them rest. The next morning, Daniel stepped outside and looked around. The snow had stopped, and sunlight spilled through the trees in golden threads. He saw the remains of a garden under the snow, wooden frames, rusted tools leaning against the wall. "Someone lived here a long time," he murmured. Ben joined him. "Can we stay?" Daniel hesitated. "We don't know who owns it." "What if nobody does?" Ben asked. Daniel looked back at the smoke rising from the chimney, the quiet peace of it. "Then maybe we take care of it until they come back," he said. They spent the day cleaning sweeping dust, patching cracks with bits of cloth, moving snow from the roof. Lily found an old broom and insisted on helping. "We're fixing our castle," she said proudly, dragging it across the floor. Daniel laughed. "That's right, Princess Lily." By evening, the place looked less abandoned. They hung their wet clothes near the fire and watched them steam. Ben found a small metal box under the bed. Inside were faded photographs, a family of 3 standing in front of the same cabin. "Looks like us," Ben whispered. Daniel nodded slowly. "Yeah, it does." The resemblance was uncanny. A man, a woman, and 2 children smiling in front of the cabin's door, years before time had taken its color. Daniel traced the edges with his thumb. "They built something good here," he said softly. Lily tugged on his sleeve. "Can we make it good again?" He smiled faintly. "We can try." He tucked the photo onto the mantel beside the note. The fire popped, sending sparks up the chimney like tiny stars. He thought about his wife, her voice, her laughter, and wondered if somehow she'd led them here. As the days passed, they settled into a rhythm. Mornings were cold but bright, afternoons filled with the quiet work of rebuilding. Daniel chopped wood, patched windows, and fixed a door with nails he scavenged from the shed. Ben explored the forest, collecting berries and twigs. Lily made up songs while sweeping the floor. Each day, the cabin looked less like a ruin and more like a home. Daniel began to smile again, small, cautious smiles that didn't hurt to wear. "We're getting good at this," Ben said one evening. Daniel nodded. "Turns out we always were." They found treasures everywhere: a working lantern, a kettle, a set of plates hidden behind a cupboard door. "It's like the house wants us to find things," Lily said. Daniel chuckled. "Maybe it does." They started writing their own note to leave one day, something that said, "We stayed here. We made it warm again." Each night, after the kids fell asleep, Daniel would sit by the fire and reread the old letter left by the cabin's former owners. The handwriting had faded, but the warmth hadn't. He wondered if one day someone might read his words the same way. A week later, a snowstorm rolled in fierce and unrelenting. The wind screamed against the walls, rattling the door. Daniel checked the roof again and again, praying it would hold. The children huddled by the fire, whispering stories to drown out the noise. When one of the logs snapped, Lily jumped. "It's okay," Daniel said, drawing them close. "The storm will pass." "How do you know?" Ben asked. Daniel smiled. "Because storms always do." It was something his wife used to say back when they still believed every morning could start fresh. By dawn, the wind had died. The world outside was buried in white silence. The cabin stood strong, the fire still glowing. "We made it," Ben whispered. Daniel nodded. "Yeah, we did." They stepped outside together, snow glistening under the pale Sunday. It felt like standing in a new world. Daniel looked at his children, their cheeks pink from cold, their laughter echoing through the trees, and felt something he hadn't in a long time. Peace. "This place saved us," he murmured. Ben grinned. "Maybe we saved it too." Over the following days, Daniel began exploring farther from the cabin. About a mile away, he found the remains of an old barn. Inside were tools, jars, and a rusted bicycle. But tucked behind a beam, wrapped in cloth, he found something else, a small box containing more letters, some money, and a deed. His breath caught. The deed listed a name he didn't recognize, dated 40 years back. "This cabin's been alone a long time," he said aloud. He brought it back, showing Ben. "Does it mean we can stay?" Ben asked. Daniel smiled softly. "Maybe it means we already belong." Daniel spent that evening reading the letters. They spoke of hard winters, lost crops, and love that endured anyway. One line stood out. "We built this house from our own hands so someone else could rest in it when we're gone." He read it aloud to the children. Lily clapped. "They built it for us." "Maybe," Daniel said, though his voice trembled. "Or maybe they just believed someone like us would need it." That night, he tucked the deed into the box with their own note, a quiet promise between strangers across time. Weeks turned into months. The snow melted, revealing patches of brown earth and forgotten life beneath. The garden began to breathe again. Daniel showed Ben how to plant potatoes, just like his father once showed him. Lily picked wildflowers and placed them in an old glass jar on the table. The cabin no longer felt borrowed, it felt earned. Sometimes hikers passed by, surprised to see smoke rising from the chimney. "Didn't think anyone lived out here," one said. Daniel smiled. "We didn't either." One morning, a man from the nearby town arrived, the property manager for the old farm that once owned the land. Daniel's chest tightened as the man approached. "You living here?" he asked. Daniel nodded carefully. "Just trying to keep it standing." The man studied the cabin, the children playing by the door, the garden slowly coming back to life. After a long pause, he said, "My grandfather built this place. If he saw it now, he'd thank you." Daniel blinked. "So we're not in trouble?" The man smiled. "No, you're home." The weeks that followed were quiet and kind. The men from town visited often, bringing supplies and helping them register the property officially. "It's the least we can do," he said. "This place was meant to be lived in." Daniel tried to thank him, but the man just waved it off. "Just promise you'll keep it warm." And he did. Every night, he kept the fire alive for the cabin, for his wife's memory, for the family that came before, and for the one he was still building. Spring came at last. The trees turned green again, and the cabin, once buried in snow, stood proud and bright. Daniel sat on the porch with Ben and Lily, watching the sunlight scatter through the branches. "We did it," Ben said. "We fixed everything." Daniel smiled. "Not everything, buddy, but enough." Lily rested her head on his arm. "Can we stay forever?" He looked at the sky, at the smoke rising gently from their chimney, and whispered, "As long as this fire keeps burning." And somewhere, maybe, the house that saved them smiled back. Spring softened everything. The snow melted into streams that whispered through the forest, carrying away months of silence. The cabin, once gray and tired, now stood among bright green shoots and the first hints of wildflowers. Daniel spent mornings repairing what winter had nearly taken, patching the roof, sanding the door, sealing cracks with pine sap and cloth. Ben carried tools while Lily fetched twigs for kindling, her laughter echoing through the clearing. Life had rhythm again, a slow and honest kind that asked for effort but gave back warmth. Every day began with work and ended with gratitude. The man from town, Henry, visited often. He was tall, weathered, with a gentle voice and the patience of someone who understood loss. "My grandfather built this place," he said one morning, helping Daniel carry a beam. "He always said a house isn't alive until someone loves it again." Daniel smiled. "Guess we're doing our best to bring it back." Henry nodded. "You're doing more than that. You're bringing it back to life." From that day on, he became part of their world, sometimes bringing tools, sometimes flour or nails, and sometimes just his company and stories of the past. They learned that the cabin had once belonged to the Miller family farmers who lived here through 3 generations until hard winters drove them away. Henry's grandfather, Thomas Miller, had built it with his own hands. The letters Daniel found in the box were his, written during the last winter he spent here. He was a good man, Henry said. Believed every act of kindness planted a seed somewhere. Looks like his seeds finally grew. Daniel stared at the cabin's walls, the same ones that had once sheltered strangers, now holding his children safe. "Then I guess we're part of his garden." With spring came color. Ben helped Daniel rebuild the small garden behind the cabin. They dug the frozen soil, planted potatoes, carrots, and beans. Lily followed, dropping wildflower seeds around the edge. "So the bees have friends," she explained. Daniel smiled. "Good thinking." In the evenings, they'd sit on the porch watching the light fade through the trees. The cabin glowed behind them, soft, golden, alive. "I like it here," Ben said one night. "Feels like the world stopped being angry." Daniel looked at him quietly. Maybe it just needed a little kindness to calm down. By May, the cabin was almost unrecognizable. Henry helped them install a rain barrel and fix the old well pump. Daniel built shelves from scrap wood, while Ben painted the shutters blue. Lily's idea. "Blue like the sky," she said proudly. Daniel laughed. "Then the house can look up even when it rains." The inside smelled of soap and coffee, the floor clean, the walls patched. There was still no electricity, but the lantern light made everything feel softer, almost sacred. Sometimes Daniel caught himself thinking that maybe this was what his wife would have wanted, not wealth, but peace. One afternoon, Henry brought news. "There's a market in town," he said. "People sell crafts, food, handmade things. You've got skills, Daniel. You could earn something there." Daniel hesitated. "I don't know. Haven't been around people much lately." "They're good folks," Henry said. "Just bring what you've built." Daniel looked around at the shelves. The small wooden bird Lily painted. The simple furniture he'd restored. "Maybe," he said quietly. That night, he worked late, shaping pieces of wood into small carvings, birds, hearts, trees. Each one felt like a prayer in his hands, a promise carved from survival. At the market, Daniel stood behind a table of his work, unsure what to expect. Ben arranged the carvings neatly, while Lily handed out small flowers from their garden. People stopped, asked questions, smiled. "You made these?" one woman asked. Daniel nodded. "Yes, ma'am. From old wood, the cabin's leftovers." She picked up a bird and traced its wings. "They feel alive." "They've had a long journey," Daniel said. By noon, almost everything had sold. When Lily dropped a few coins into his hand, she grinned. "We're rich," Daniel laughed. "Rich in good people, maybe." The market became part of their life. Every Saturday, they'd ride into town with Henry's help, sell Daniel's carvings, and buy what they needed: flour, nails, candles, sometimes a small treat for the kids. The townspeople began recognizing them. Some remembered the news story about the homeless father and his children who rebuilt an old cabin. Others simply admired their quiet strength. "You did good, Daniel," Henry said one afternoon. "You turned loss into something that gives." Daniel shook his head. "We just found a house. The rest happened on its own." Henry smiled. "That's how real change works." Back home, the garden began to sprout. Small green leaves pushed through the soil like tiny declarations of hope. Lily named each plant Mr. Potato, Carrot Kate, Beanie. Daniel laughed, but didn't stop her. "Gotta name them," she said seriously. "That way they grow faster." "Is that how it works?" he teased. "It does now." At night, they'd eat by the fire, simple meals but full of gratitude. Ben had stopped asking when they'd go back to the city. Lily no longer cried at night. The forest had adopted them, wrapping its arms around their little home. One evening, Henry brought an old radio. "Doesn't pick up much," he warned, "but sometimes, if the wind's right, you get music." Daniel turned the dial carefully until faint static gave way to a slow tune. The melody filled the cabin, blending with the crackle of the fire. Lily danced barefoot on the wooden floor while Ben clapped in rhythm. Daniel leaned back, eyes closed, the corners of his mouth lifting. For the first time in years, he wasn't listening for trouble, he was just listening. The sound of his children's laughter became the sweetest song he'd ever heard. As summer deepened, so did their connection to the land. Daniel taught Ben how to mend fences, chop wood safely, and listen for weather changes. Lily learned how to bake bread using the stove, filling the cabin with a smell of warmth. "Mom would like this," Ben said one evening. "She'd like that we didn't give up." Daniel's voice caught in his throat. "Yeah," he said quietly. "She'd be proud." They set her photograph on the shelf beside the old Miller family's picture. Two families who'd never met, sharing one roof across time. Somehow, it felt right. Then one day, something unexpected happened. A couple from the nearby town knocked on their door, strangers with kind faces. "We heard about what you did here," the woman said. "Our church is organizing a community repair project. We'd like to help." Daniel frowned. "Help us?" The man smiled. "You've done plenty alone. Let us return the favor." The following weekend, people arrived, men, women, kids, carrying paint, tools, and food. They fixed the porch, replaced broken glass, even built a small chicken coop. The clearing buzzed with life and laughter. "Guess we started something," Ben whispered. Daniel nodded. Kindness spreads. By autumn, the cabin looked brand new. The porch shone with fresh paint, the garden overflowed with vegetables, and the roof no longer leaked. "Feels strange," Daniel said to Henry one evening. "Seeing people come here just to help us." Henry chuckled. "They're not helping you, Daniel. They're helping themselves, remembering what it feels like to do something good." Daniel smiled. "Guess this cabin's got a way of teaching that." Henry raised his cup. "To the Millers," he said, "and to the Davises, who brought their house back to life. To the fire," Daniel added softly, "may it never go out." One cool October morning, Daniel woke to find the first frost dusting the ground. He stepped outside and breathed in the crisp air. The world felt familiar now, less like a stranger, more like a friend. Ben came out holding a wooden bird he'd carved himself. "For you, Dad." Daniel took it, smiling. "Looks just like the one Lily made." Yeah, Ben said proudly. But mine flies higher, Daniel laughed. I'll keep it close. He placed it on the windowsill beside Lily's wildflowers, both catching the morning light, reminders that hope, once planted, keeps growing. The next week, a letter arrived, addressed to Daniel. It was from the local council. Nervously, he opened it, expecting bad news. Instead, it said the property had been transferred into his name, officially recognized as their home. A handwritten note at the bottom read, "For the family that proved a house is more than wood, and walls, it's love, rebuilt." Daniel read it 3 times, his hands trembling. When he told the children, Lily squealed, "It's ours? Really ours?" Daniel laughed through tears. "Yeah, baby. It's really ours." The cabin had stopped being borrowed. Now it was theirs forever. That night, they celebrated with bread, soup, and laughter. Henry joined them, bringing cider. "You've come a long way," he said, raising his glass. "From a cold car to this." Daniel nodded slowly. "We had help. From people, and maybe from this place itself." Henry smiled. "Places remember, they hold on to good hands." Lily yawned, curling up beside her brother. "We're never leaving, right?" Daniel looked at the fire. "Not unless the world needs fixing somewhere else," Henry chuckled. "Then I guess you'll be busy for a while." Winter returned, but this time they were ready. The woodpile was stacked high, the roof sealed tight, and the pantry full. The first snow fell soft and harmless. "It's different now," Ben said, watching flakes through the window. "We're not scared anymore." "That's what home does," Daniel replied. "It makes the world less big." He tucked Lily under her blanket and added another log to the fire. Outside, the forest slept. Inside, warmth bloomed in every corner, not just from the flames, but from everything they'd built with their hands, their hope, and their second chance. On Christmas Eve, Daniel lit candles along the windowsill. Lily sang softly, while Ben wrapped small gifts made from wood scraps. Daniel watched them, feeling something deep, and still a peace that no storm could take away. He thought of the Millers, of Henry, of everyone who'd walked through their door with kindness in their hands. "Merry Christmas, sweetheart," he whispered toward the photograph of his wife. "We're doing okay now." Outside, the snow glowed under moonlight, and the cabin stood strong, the same house that once saved them, now shining like a lantern in the woods. The next morning, the children ran outside, their laughter echoing through the forest. "Look, Dad," Ben called. "Deer tracks!" Daniel stepped out, smiling. The air smelled of pine and wood smoke. He watched them chase each other through the snow, their joy pure and unguarded. For a moment, he saw the reflection of their mother in them, her courage, her warmth. "You'd be proud of them," he whispered. He turned back to the cabin, its chimney puffing slow curls of smoke, and felt gratitude so strong it almost hurt. "And you'd be proud of me too," he added quietly. That night, after the children fell asleep, Daniel sat by the fire, the radio humming faintly. He held the old Miller photo in one hand and his own in the other. 2 families, 2 stories, 1 home. "We kept it warm," he said softly, "just like you asked." The fire crackled, the wind brushed gently against the walls, and the stars watched from above. Somewhere between memory and now, between loss and finding, the world had given him something precious, not just shelter, but belonging. And as the flames danced in his eyes, Daniel smiled. The house had saved them all. The cabin had seen another winter, but this time it didn't feel like a battle. Snow rested gently on the roof instead of pressing down, and the smoke that rose from the chimney was a quiet signal to the world. We're still here. Daniel woke early, as he always did, to feed the fire. Ben and Lily still slept, curled together under blankets that smelled faintly of pine and soap. He looked around their small home, repaired, painted, alive, and felt that familiar mix of gratitude and disbelief. "We made it," he whispered. "And we're still making it." Spring returned with birdsong and the sound of thawing earth. Daniel began to rebuild the old barn, turning it into a workshop. He didn't plan it at first, it just happened, one board at a time. Neighbors brought scrap wood, tools, and even a small sign that read, "The Hope Shed." Before long, people from town started visiting. Some came to buy Daniel's carvings. Others just came to talk. "Feels peaceful here," one man said. Daniel smiled. "It used to be a quiet place for survival," he replied. "Now it's for starting over." One rainy afternoon, a woman and her teenage son appeared at the edge of the clearing. They were soaked, their clothes thin and dirty. Daniel saw something in their faces. He recognized exhaustion, mixed with a faint glimmer of pride. "You lost?" he asked gently. The woman hesitated. "We were looking for work. Someone said there's a kind man who fixes things out this way." Daniel smiled softly. "Then you found the right place." He led them inside, handed them towels, and poured hot tea. "You can rest here a while," he said. "We've got room." The woman's eyes filled with tears. Ben and Lily watched quietly as the visitors warmed by the fire. "They're like us," Lily whispered. Daniel nodded. "That's why we helped them." The boy, about Ben's age, looked around shyly. "You built all this?" he asked. "With help," Ben said proudly. "And a lot of mistakes." They laughed together, the kind of laughter that heals something invisible. The woman offered to work in the garden as thanks. Daniel waved her off. "You don't owe anything. Just keep the fire going." But she did help anyway, humming softly as she worked, her voice blending with the birds outside. Word began to spread. Travelers, drifters, and struggling families started coming. By some stayed a night, some longer. Daniel never turned anyone away. The cabin wasn't large, but the warmth inside seemed to stretch to fit whoever needed it. People began calling it the warm house. "It's not ours anymore," Ben said one evening, looking at the crowded porch. "It's everyone's," Daniel smiled. "That's the best kind of home." Lily, who had been helping a young girl braid her hair, added, "It's like the house got bigger inside." Daniel nodded. "Maybe hearts work the same way." Henry watched the changes with quiet pride. "You turned this place into something my grandfather would have dreamed of," he said one morning, sipping coffee on the porch. He believed homes should outlive their owners. Daniel smiled. "Guess it's still doing that." Henry looked at the laughter inside, the way light spilled through the open door. "You've built something rare, Daniel. People come here and remember they still belong to the world." Daniel nodded, eyes thoughtful. "So did we." That summer, Daniel officially registered the Warm House as a community shelter. Local churches and volunteers helped expand it. They added bunk beds, a kitchen stove, and storage for food and supplies. What once was a forgotten cabin had become a living heartbeat in the woods. At night, the sound of soft voices and quiet breathing filled the rooms, like a symphony of second chances. Daniel often sat by the window, watching the lanterns flicker. "You see this, honey?" he whispered toward the photo of his wife. "You were right. Kindness always finds its way back home." Ben had grown taller that year. He started helping Daniel teach new visitors how to repair things, chairs, windows, even bicycles. "You're good at this," Daniel said one afternoon, watching his son patch a broken stool. "Guess I learned from the best," Ben said, grinning. Lily spent her days drawing flowers on scraps of wood, leaving them around the house for guests to find. Each one had a small message on the back. "You matter. You are safe. You are loved." Sometimes Daniel found them tucked into people's bags, carried away like tiny blessings on the road. One evening, a storm rolled through. The power went out in town, and the forest roared with wind and rain. Inside, the fire blazed strong, and everyone gathered close strangers, friends, children. Daniel lit extra lanterns, their glow reflecting in a dozen pairs of tired eyes. "This reminds me of that first winter," he said quietly to Henry. "Only this time, we're not alone." Henry nodded. "That's how it works. You start with one flame, and pretty soon, the whole valley's glowing." Daniel smiled, his heart full. "Then let's keep it burning." After the storm, they found a small bird's nest blown from a tree. The eggs inside were unbroken, protected by twigs and grass. Lily held it carefully. "Can we save them?" she asked. Daniel smiled. "We'll try." They built a little shelter for it by the window. Days later, tiny chicks hatched, their voices filling the room with soft chirps. "Even the smallest things find warmth here," Ben said. Daniel nodded. "That's what makes this place alive." It became their symbol, a reminder that even fragile beginnings could grow wings. As the months passed, people began donating supplies, clothes, food, tools. A local carpenter offered to help build an extension. "You're doing good work," he said. "Figure you need more space for it." Daniel tried to refuse payment for his carvings, but customers insisted. "You helped me fix my roof," one woman said. "Let me return the favor." It wasn't charity anymore, it was community. Everyone gave what they could. Everyone received what they needed. And in the center of it all stood a cabin that had once been forgotten, now teaching the world how to remember itself. One cold morning, Daniel received a letter from the town council. He opened it carefully, heart pounding. Inside was a certificate naming the Warm House an official refuge center supported by local funding. A note at the bottom read, "For those who keep hope alive where others lose it." Daniel stared at it for a long time. Then he smiled, folded it gently, and placed it beside the old Miller family's photo. "Looks like the story keeps going," he whispered. The fire crackled softly in agreement. Life settled into a beautiful kind of routine. Mornings filled with coffee and laughter, afternoons with work and purpose. At night, the forest hummed like a lullaby. Daniel often took quiet walks to the river, watching how the light danced on the water. Sometimes he thought about the night they'd first arrived. Cold, desperate, lost. The man he'd been, then felt like a stranger. "Funny," he murmured, "how the darkest roads lead to the warmest places." Behind him, the cabin's windows glowed faintly through the trees, a beacon that no longer needed saving because it had learned to save others. Lily had started a small tradition. Every time someone left the cabin to start their new life, she'd hand them a small wooden heart with their name carved on it. "So you don't forget that you have one," she'd say. People cried, laughed, hugged her tight. Daniel watched each goodbye with pride and sadness, the kind that means something good has ended, so something better can begin. "You're doing your mother's work now," he told Lily once. She smiled. "No, Dad, I'm doing yours." One evening, Henry grew quiet by the fire. "You know," he said, "I think your wife and my grandfather would have liked each other." Daniel looked up. "You think so?" "Yeah," Henry said with a smile. "They both built something that outlived them, something that doesn't stop giving." Daniel stared into the flames. "Guess that's all any of us can hope for." They sat in silence. After that, two men connected by generations of kindness, while outside, the snow began to fall again, soft, slow, like a benediction. As winter deepened, Daniel received a letter from a young man who'd once stayed at the warm house. It read, "I was ready to give up before I came there, but you reminded me I still had something worth fighting for. I found a job. I found peace. Thank you." Daniel folded it carefully, placing it in a small box with the Miller letters, his wife's photo, and the deed. A new story had joined the old ones, proof that good things don't disappear. They ripple forward quietly, touching lives we'll never see. By the next spring, the clearing around the cabin looked different. Flowers bloomed everywhere, some wild, some planted by Lily's careful hands. A new sign hung above the porch carved by Ben that read, "This house stays warm." Visitors still came, and Daniel still welcomed them with the same smile and the same words, "Come in. It's warm here." He'd light the fire, pour tea, and listen. He'd stopped asking people where they came from or why. It didn't matter. What mattered was that, for one night at least, they weren't alone in the cold. One afternoon, Daniel took the children to the hill behind the house. From there, they could see the valley, the town, and the small silver line of the river. "Look at that," he said softly. "That's everything we've built, not just us, but everyone who's passed through." Ben nodded. "You think it'll last?" Daniel smiled. "If we keep believing in it, it will." Lily squeezed his hand. "It's like the cabin keeps everyone's stories." "Exactly," Daniel said. "Every laugh, every tear, every thank you, it all stays in the wood." That evening, as the sun set behind the trees, Daniel lit the lanterns around the porch. Their golden glow spilled across the clearing, painting the snow in shades of amber and rose. The sound of laughter drifted from inside new voices, new lives beginning. He stood there for a moment, breathing it all in. "You did good, old house," he said softly. "Real good." A breeze moved through the trees, making the eaves creak gently, almost like an answer. The house had no words, but it didn't need any. It spoke in warmth, in light, in love that never ran out. That night, Daniel sat by the fire with Ben and Lily at his side. The room glowed with quiet peace. On the mantel sat the old Miller photo, their own, and dozens more faces of those who'd passed through and found a piece of hope. "You know," Daniel said, "I used to think this cabin saved us." Ben looked up. "Didn't it?" Daniel smiled. "It did, but now I think we saved it too." Lily leaned against him. "We saved each other." The fire crackled softly, the snow whispered outside, and the house full of life and laughter kept its promise. It stayed warm.